Anthropological literature on native ritual usually focuses on but a sliver of the whole, just enough description on a few flagship events to forward some new theoretical angle, a new contemplation on the ultimate reasons for man's symbolic rites. I myself had written such. Whatever ritual principles were artificially isolated and written about for publications all came together with their originally cohesive force in the actual ceremonies like Tlamanas. In these irreducible dedications to Aztec religion, I could see more than tenets of ritual kinship, structural functionalism, or generalized reciprocity. I found the very key to the necessities and techniques of living in the Aztec's world. I could feel what being Aztec is. Festive flower music sounded from Cristobal's house's porch to celebrate the first maize harvests of the season. A duo performed the themes with violin and guitar. Temoc, the violinist and an impassioned costumbrista, lived with his wife and granddaughters in a simple shack without electricity at the northern periphery of Altepetl. The guitarist, an active Catholic, came from Tenamit to play for food and fee. The music must be lively if it would animate the maize child Chicomexochitl and motivate her to dance with us. The maize so enlivened would thrive throughout the year. The maize must be raised like a school child on its first steps toward maturity. Jose once compared the filaments at the end of the ear to the hair atop my head, as if the ears on the stalk were human heads, so depicted on the Maya-influenced murals of Cacaxtla 1,000 years ago. So even if I would hold the ear like an inanimate object, it is quite alive. After 6 to 8 years without costumbre ceremonies for the maize, drought will come and the maize would cry. Tlamanas was performed to ensure that this wouldn't happen. Carlo was the Xochitlalquetl charged to conduct Tlamanas for Cristobal's household. A native of the nearby hamlet of Acatepec, Carlo was a balding 60-year-old who often wore blue. His spindly technique wouldn't have suggested that he was a graceful dancer, the most limber ceremonialist I had met in the Huasteca. Carlo waved an orange ceramic goblet, wafting of copal incense, before the domestic altar toward the end of the central room of Cristobal's house. He swayed his lips in silent prayer under the flowery tenor. Carlo wafted copal fumes to the arch outside. By then a white plastic table had been set at the porch between the arch and this house entrance. It was draped with a white tablecloth, embellished with brilliant cross-stitch floral designs. Carlo swept his feet as he swung from side to side, facing a small pair of bundles on the table, each tied from 4 ears of the fresh maize. Their miniature dress respectively indicated the niño and niña, simply clad in white and pink handkerchiefs. As if the short tassels of marigold blossoms swaddled around the maize child bundles weren't bedecked enough with the bright orange petals. Carlo and several others grabbed handfuls of petals from short baskets and cast them over the table and toward the arch. Effulgent colors drifted around the maize children as we gave them table offerings of fresh sweetbread, chicken broth, mountain coffee, and bottled soda, to the melodies of the ritual string music. That was when the spiritual world of the Nahua came back to life for me. Maize, the most fundamental crop of Mesoamerica, was made to look human. In turn, it must be raised with all the attention for a growing human child. For we humans are ourselves comprised of the maize we eat. In this Tlamanas ceremony, I had returned to the essence of the Mesoamerican agrarian cult, practiced for the last 3,000 years. The time came to move the activity into the central room. The table was brought inside, as were the 4 large quails and the 4 stalks that had been set around the arch. The boy and girl maize bundles were removed to the altar table at the end of the room. Several poured the maize ears from the baskets into a large pile in the center of the tiled room, and they lined them neatly into a circular stack, all ears pointing inwards. It had 4 layers of at least 200 ears, with a meter diameter and a foot in height. Carlo tied 4 ears together with a white string and set the bundle on the floor west of the circular maize stack, facing the niño and niña bundles on the altar table. This standing bundle was the shack to house Chicomexochitl as the maize. At the opposite end of the stack, several maize ears were laid as a makeshift staircase climbing to the surface of this house made of corn. 4 long beeswax candles were slightly melted at their base so that they could stand freely at the corners of the stack. One of the attendees produced a long marigold garland on a white string, and she encircled it upon the stack's surface, which was then draped in a white cloth with two huge rose blossom and leaf cross-stitched designs at its center and corners. 3 actors brought more flour to the stack by casting marigold petals from a basket. Then the maize child, Chicomexochitl, had to receive her blessings and foods. Carlo knelt toward the stack as he recited a litany to the Virgin from the flimsy pages of a worn hymnal. The maize had itself become the granary house, the consecrated temple, and the offertory altar. When all the foods were set around the stack, they included mugs of sweet mountain coffee and hot chocolate, plastic cups and bottles of soda, a plate of chicken, 4 bowls of adobada pork, a scattering of sweetbreads, and a stack of tortillas. It was all food for Chicomexochitl, who would eat well as her flower music was playing. The maize would prosper because it was so nourished, and so would we. Cristobal's family set out a 2-meter dining table near the Maize Stack and abutted the smaller offertory table from the outdoor arch to it. The room's hot, humid air weighed with trickling incense, floral fragrance, sibilant music, and food steam. I sat at the dining table with several other men as we heartily ate the spicy pork soup. Knowing how to tear and fold grilled tortilla, I could scoop a whole bowl. I hoped that Chicomexochitl was savoring her meal as much as I was with mine. After Chicomexochitl partook of her meal, participants removed the food offerings from the stack and set them on the altar table. They folded and removed the white cloth, dampened from the foods above and the ears below. Tlamanas was distribution, into a circle, around the eating space, and among the participants. Into a circle. Attendees lit slim candles and neatly spaced them upon the floor around the maize stack. Carlo dashed beer at its 4 corners as he walked around it. Around the eating space. Alba's grandfather, a graying man with a bulbous nose, took 5 ears from the stack and held them in the smoke rising from the censer in Carlo's hand. He set the first 4 ears at the corners of the dining room. He leaned the 5th against the side of the ceramic comal grill in the kitchen. It would ensure that Chicomexochitl would be present where the maize would be cooked and eaten. Among the participants, Alba's father began removing ears from the stack and grouping them into sets of 8. The attendees began to take the sets and leave. This was the final gift of Chicomexochitl, the virtue of sharing the harvest. Each octet of ears was intended for one household to take home and eat. The Tonalli of Chicomexochitl, Timok told me from his plastic chair as he pointed at the stack with his violin bow. Even after several hours of intense ritual activity and writing, the first mention of Tonalli I had heard in the Huasteca perked my attention. I knew much about the concept, but only from literature. Tonalli was derived from the Nahuatl word for sunlight, for it was the light cast upon one's birthday sign that would guide your life's destiny. It was the person's companion spirit, which was often manifested as some sort of local animal with whom one shared an empathic rapport. But it's not like a person's spirit or shadow, Timok clarified in Nahuatl as he tapped his shadow on the tiled floor with the end of his bow. It's the Tonalli of Chicomexochitl. It was the small bundle of 4 ears standing beside the circular stack which embodied Chicomexochitl that was the maize child's spiritual double. It didn't have to be animal. I saw the light of Timok's own Tonalli in his dark eyes as he elaborated on the subject. Now go write it down. So even a god could have a Tonalli. It recalled the great feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl, who in one Aztec myth summoned his spiritual counterpart, the canine Xolotl, to descend into the underworld to retrieve the bones of a previous generation of humanity as the building material for the human bodies of this present creation. Moreover, a god's Tonalli could be tangible, and in this case, edible. I hadn't just learned a modern version of an ancient Mexican theology, I had eaten it. That I had been in the presence of the maize deity all afternoon was an awesome, if latent, epiphany. Tlamanas was closing as the participants departed, and I thanked Carlo and Cristobal for all their accommodations. I promptly readied myself for a walk to Tinamit to plan the interview with the teacher from Tehuiloyan. On my walk back to Altepetl, I saw a dead dog by the side of the road. My head was abuzz with these various impressions. The interview rescheduled, the unburied dog, and especially the Tonalli of Chicomexochitl. As I was approaching the northeast boundary of Altepetl, for at least a moment I just stood and gazed at the hilled western horizon beyond the orange orchards and palm trees. The sun remained high over the rolling pastures and scattered forest. Then the buzz dissolved and my head was clear. I couldn't have imagined that a maize child would lend me such serenity. I returned to Jose's house and showered. For more experiences and lessons from living in the Aztec and Otomi villages of Veracruz, please visit shamanscross.com, the website for my memoir. I pinned the link in the comments. Thank you for watching and good roads.